Hi guys, welcome back to Kim's class. The next 3 units will explore each of the 3 time tenses for verbs. In the first unit, we'll look deeper into the present tense by including aspects of the present tense. We'll learn about the simple present, present continuous, present perfect, and present perfect continuous. Then we'll do the same with the aspects of the past tense. And then, of course, in Unit 3, we'll talk about the 4 aspects of the future tense. I found that teaching that all 12 units together, with all of the tenses together, can be a little more confusing than when I teach a time tense all together. I hope I'm right. After each video, there will be a link to an activity for you to practice what you have learned. You'll find the link in the description of each of the videos. Let's talk about why mastering verbs is important. In English, it's possible to express several different tenses through a combination of words as well as by changing the form of the verb. Understanding these tenses allows you, the writer and speaker, with a clearer presentation of the sequence of events and the passage of time described in your writing or in your speaking. So let's take a look at these verb tenses all together. Remember, in each lesson, I'll be talking about each time tense differently. So verb tenses come in 3 times: past, present, and future. Each one of these time tenses has 4 aspects. For example, simple, continuous, perfect, and perfect continuous. Take a look at example sentences for each of these time tenses and the aspects. I won't read them for you, but I suggest you pause your video and write these sentences that you see in the chart. Writing down what you have learned will help you learn it clearer, better, and faster. Pause your video and write these sentences down. Don't worry if it seems a little overwhelming. Remember, I'm going to break each of the 3 time tenses into separate lessons. For each lesson, we'll talk about what the tense is, when it's used, and how to use it. Today's lesson will focus on the 4 aspects of the present tense. I'll start with an overview of all of the aspects, then talk about each aspect individually, compare some of the aspects together, and then I'll close with an opportunity for you to practice what you've learned. Let's look at the basic comparisons of the 4 aspects of the present tense. On your screen, you will see a basic overview of the 4 aspects. You might want to pause the video and write this chart down. Notice that I've included a timeline to help you understand these aspects more clearly. Write the timeline down too. Remember, writing things in your own handwriting has proven to help store the information in your brain far better than just looking at something. Now, there are of course other descriptions and examples of each of these aspects than what you see here. This is why I'm going to go over in more detail each of these aspects on the next few slides. Let's go ahead and start with the present simple. The present simple is a very common tense, and it has many uses. This is probably the first tense that you learned way back in level 1. Here is when you might use the present tense and a few examples. First, we use the present simple to talk about routine actions. I go to work every day. He rides his bike on Sundays. Those are routine actions. We also use the present simple to talk about facts. The earth is round. The sun rises in the east. These are facts. The last example on when we use the present simple is to give directions. Turn right at the light. Open the box and remove the plastic. Now, don't forget that when you're using the third person singular, he, she, or it, you must add an S to the end of the base verb, like in he rides and the sun rises. In any of the present tenses, you can form positive, negative, or interrogative, which means a question, with the sentence. Let's look at the chart at some of these examples. Here you see some examples of the positive, negative, and interrogative examples. I talk, you talk, we talk, they talk. He talks, she talks, it talks. In the negative, I do not talk, you do not talk, we do not talk, they do not talk. He does not talk, she does not talk, it does not talk. In the question form, do I talk? Do you talk? Do we talk? Do they talk? Does he talk? Does she talk? Does it talk? Note that in written English, we usually write do not and does not. However, in spoken English, we often use the contraction don't and doesn't. On most exams, you need to try to follow this rule. Use contractions when you speak, informally, and spell the whole word out when you're writing or speaking in a more formal way. Another important thing to note is that when the third person singular is used with an auxiliary verb, like the word do, the auxiliary word takes the S. See how the word do becomes does? That is why the main verb, in this case, the verb talk, does not change to talks, even in the third person. Now that we have briefly discussed the present simple, let's look at the present continuous. The present continuous is sometimes called the present progressive. However, most linguists and textbooks now refer to it as continuous. When I first started studying linguistics, we called it progressive. But now, like I said, we call it continuous. The continuous is formed by using to be and then the base verb plus the 3 letters ing. There are many times that you can use the present continuous. Here's when you may use this tense and a few of the examples. You use the present continuous when you're talking about actions that are happening right now. I am reading a book. She is doing homework. We also use the present continuous to talk about an action that is ongoing but maybe isn't happening right now. For example, I am reading an interesting book before bed. Or, they are studying to be teachers. We also use the present continuous to describe a developing situation. It's getting hot outside. The weather is turning cold. And the last use of the present continuous is when we describe a regular action. For example, we are usually working at this time. He is normally driving the small car. I anticipate that many of you have a question about the difference between example 1 and example 2. This can often confuse people. The example for number 1 is pretty obvious. I am reading a book. That means at this very moment, while I'm speaking to you, I'm holding a book and I'm actively reading it. However, in the other example, if I read a book every night before I go to sleep, it means it's ongoing, but not exactly at this moment. I may also use the tense and say, I'm reading a book before bed. So just like in the present tenses, you can form positive, negative, and interrogative, which remember means a question, sentences using the present continuous. Let's take a look at this chart of how we can use the present continuous in these 3 ways. On your screen, you see the examples. In the positive, we say, I am talking. You are talking. We are talking. They are talking. He is talking. She is talking. It is talking. In the negative, I am not talking. You are not talking. We are not talking. They are not talking. He is not talking. She is not talking. It is not talking. In the question form, am I talking? Are you talking? Are we talking? Are they talking? Is he talking? Is she talking? Is it talking? Again, be careful of contractions. We usually write out the full contraction when we're writing or speaking formally. But if it's an informal speak, we can use the contraction form. However, on most exams, it's best to follow the rule of writing the entire word out. So now that we've briefly discussed the present continuous, let's look at the present perfect. Besides from that little clarification in the present continuous, the first 2 tenses I'm sure were just a review for you. For the rest of this lesson, I'm going to focus on the other 2 aspects of the present tense, present perfect and present perfect continuous. These 2 aspects can be difficult, even for native speakers. I'll do my best to give a brief explanation of each, as I did with the simple and the continuous, and then spend some time comparing the 2. Let's go ahead and start with the present perfect. The present perfect can be a little trickier than the other tenses. The present perfect of any verb is comprised of 2 elements. The appropriate form of the auxiliary verb to have, plus the past participle of the main verb. The past participle of a regular verb is the base verb plus ed. We use the present perfect to talk about a finished action that happened at an indefinite time in the past. For example, the children have played for 2 hours. She has eaten all the cake. Each of these actions occurred, but it's not stated exactly when they occurred. It could refer to an isolated event, something that happened repeatedly, or something that was true over a long period of time. But the key to this example is that we do not know that the action, that we do know that the action is finished. Later, we're going to look at how this is different in the present continuous. We also use the present perfect to talk about actions that are permanent. These actions happen in the past, but they continue to happen now. Let's look at these examples. I have taught English for 16 years. He has spoken English his entire life. In each of these sentences, there's a time period that is still continuing. Although these actions already began, they continue to be repeated again. They're permanent and they will not change. Later, we'll look at how this is different with the present perfect continuous. The emphasis of the present perfect tense is the result of the action. It's used for recent events that have a result in or on the effect of the present moment. For example, he has repaired the sink. The unspoken result may be, and now I have water. He has repaired the sink. The unspoken result, and now I have water. Let's look at the next example. They have planted flowers. Unspoken result, the yard looks amazing. We'll contrast that later when we get into the present perfect continuous, and I think it will make more sense. Now let's look at the last usage of the present perfect. We use the present perfect when we're trying to indicate how much or how many of something have been completed. You can see with the two examples, it has taken 5 years to learn English. This tells you how many. 5 years. I have drunk too much coffee. This is telling you how much. Now, just like in the previous aspect, you can form a positive, a negative, or an interrogative, which means what? That's right, a question. We can use these forms in the present perfect. Let's take a minute and look at this chart. In the positive, we would say something like, I have spoken. You have spoken. We have spoken. They have spoken. He has spoken. She has spoken. It has spoken. In the negative, I have not spoken. You have not spoken. We have not spoken. They have not spoken. He has not spoken. She has not spoken. It has not spoken. And when we're asking a question, have I spoken? Have you spoken? Have we spoken? Have they spoken? Has he spoken? Has she spoken? Has it spoken? You'll notice that in this form, the only verb that changes is the have for I, you, we, they, and the has for he, she, and it. So now that we've briefly discussed the present perfect, let's look at the last aspect, the present perfect continuous. The present perfect continuous is less common than the previous aspects, but it does have a very specific application. The present perfect continuous is formed using either has or have plus the word been and the verb in the present participle ing. We use the present perfect continuous to show that something started in the past and has continued up to now. For 5 minutes, for 2 weeks, and since Tuesday are all durations which can be used with the present perfect continuous. One way you can use this tense is to describe an ongoing activity that started in the past but is still continuing right now at this moment. The action is not finished. Unlike the present perfect, where the action is finished. Let's look at some of the examples. The children have been playing since this morning. In this sentence, the playing started earlier, but it's still continuing as I speak. The same as with this sentence. She has been eating cake for hours. Again, the eating started earlier and she's continuing to eat now. She's not done eating cake. Another way you can use this tense is to describe an action that is temporary. Now, this is unlike the present perfect, where the action is permanent. Let's look at these examples. I have been teaching English for an hour. Again, the action started in the past, is continuing now, but in this case, the action will stop at some point soon, or at least you hope it will stop soon. Let's look at the other example. He has been speaking with his mom. See how the action started earlier and is still happening now, but it will end soon. The present continuous also emphasizes the duration, unlike the present perfect that emphasizes the result. Duration versus result. Look at the example. He has been repairing the sink for 2 hours. The result of fixing the sink is not as important, but how long it is taking is. The same is true with the sentences, they have been planting flowers all spring, and I have been drinking coffee all morning. The emphasis is on the duration of the action and less on the result of the action. Just like the previous aspects, you can form positive, negative and interrogative sentences using the present perfect. Take a look at the chart in front of you. Read the chart and write it down if you need to. Let's briefly look at the present perfect continuous. In the positive, I have been speaking, you have been speaking, we have been speaking, they have been speaking. He has been speaking, she has been speaking. In the negative, I have not been speaking, you have not been speaking, we have not been speaking, they have not been speaking. He has not been speaking, she has not been speaking, it has not been speaking. In the question form, it sounds like this. Have I been speaking? Have you been speaking? Have we been speaking? Have they been speaking? Has he been speaking? Has she been speaking? And has it been speaking? Now that we've seen the positive, negative, and interrogative forms of the present perfect, let's see what we have next. So I'm pretty confident that you have a good understanding of the first two aspects, the present and the present continuous. The last two, the present perfect and the present perfect continuous, may need a little more explanation. I'm going to quickly show you how these last two compare using a side-by-side explanation. Take a look at the chart you see now. The obvious difference between these two aspects of the present tense is how it's formed. As I said, the present perfect of any verb is composed of two elements: the appropriate form of the auxiliary verb to have, plus the past participle of the main verb. The past participle of a regular verb is a base verb plus ed, and the present perfect continuous is formed using has, have, plus the word been and the present participle. Let's look at these side by side. Do you see how the sentence in the present perfect is finished? The kids have played for 2 hours. But in the present perfect continuous, it is not finished. The kids have been playing since morning. Present perfect is also permanent. I have taught English for 16 years. But in the continuous, it's temporary. I have been teaching this class for 1 hour. Another difference is in the present perfect, it emphasizes the result. He has fixed the sink. However, in the present perfect continuous, the emphasis is on the duration or how long the action took. He has been fixing the sink for 4 hours. The last difference comes with how much or how many in the present perfect. It has taken 3 days to prepare this lesson, versus the continuous that focuses on how long. I have been preparing this lesson for 3 days. Now, before you start thinking that these two aspects of the present tense always have a different meaning, let me show you when sometimes they're not that different. Take a look at the examples that you see on your screen. Sometimes there's really no difference in meaning between these two aspects. This is especially the case when you're looking at verbs like live, work, and study. Here you see some examples of when there really is not a different meaning. They've lived here since 2004. The same as they have been living here since 2004. I have studied English for 10 years. Same meaning, I have been studying English for 10 years. Here's one more example of when these two aspects really don't mean much of a difference. He has been working at our company since 2009, and he has worked at the company since 2009. I realize that there was a lot of information in this video. I do hope, however, that teaching all four aspects of this tense side by side helped you see things a little clearer. Although there's nothing more than I would like to teach you face to face with all of you here in an actual classroom, there is an advantage to having these lessons in video format. Can you guess what that is? You can pause the video, write notes, answer and ask questions you might have, and even watch the information or the instruction again. Remember, like I said, writing down the information in the charts and writing example sentences helps you understand the concepts more thoroughly. Additionally, don't forget that I have made activities to help you practice what you learned here in this video. You'll find links to those activities in the comments section below. You also may see a link to another video in my Action English series or in my Street Talk series. This will give you more practice in putting these tenses together and learning some of the contractions that you might have seen in the previous lesson. But for now, that concludes today's lesson. But before you go, I'd like to ask you to do a few things. If you enjoyed this video, would you please like this video? Also, I'd love it if you subscribed to this channel. That way, every time I post a new video, you'll be notified. Wouldn't you like that? Another thing that you can do is share this video. I bet you know people in your community that might benefit from learning the lessons that you learned today. The last thing I'd like you to do is write a comment in the comment section. I can't be here in class with you face to face, but I would love to hear from you. So write me a comment in the section below. Tell me how much you enjoyed the video or even any questions that you might have. I'd love to hear from you. And lastly, please don't forget what a blessing it is for me to share this passion with you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for allowing me to come on this journey with you to learn English. Goodbye for now. I really hope I'll see you soon.